Well, the Iran war has put the Israel-America partnership to test. Remember, the Trump administration appears to be taking a tough stance toward Benjamin Netanyahu. The two allies are now finding it difficult to agree on the terms of peace. Israel wants greater operational autonomy in Lebanon, but Iran is seeking to link any peace agreement to a comprehensive ceasefire in Lebanon. The recent exchange of fire between Israel and Iran has irked Washington. Netanyahu proceeded with the strikes against Iran despite Trump's warnings. The U.S. president reportedly called Netanyahu and warned that Israel would be on its own if it continues its strike against Iran. Netanyahu reportedly called off a planned attack on Tehran following Donald Trump's warning. Negotiations are currently underway, and the U.S. president, in fact, Vice President, remember, J.D. Vance, is hoping for a deal that he calls a home run. Vice President J.D. Vance has said that the American objective is to prevent Iran from getting any nukes. He's also added that Israel may or may not like it, but that remains a key American interest. J.D. Vance acknowledged that while the United States and Israel share many common interests, there are also areas where their priorities diverge. Differences between Netanyahu and Trump, remember, have been building over the past few weeks. Earlier, the U.S. president had reportedly called Netanyahu crazy, and he'd warned him against striking Beirut. But despite this, Israel proceeded with the strikes in southern Beirut, triggering the latest flare-up. Now, Israel and United States maintain a close-knit defense cooperation. But remember, Trump is now stuck between geopolitical risks and political challenges. He is in the middle of a war that he cannot end without a deal. At the same time, he risks angering his supporters back home if this war reignites. Now, this leaves diplomacy as the only viable option. However, U.S. and Iran continue to apply pressure on each other in the Strait of Hormuz, which has now become the biggest choke point in this conflict. Israel's role remains crucial as well. Iran refuses to agree to a peace deal that excludes Lebanon. And if Israel continues its operations against Hezbollah, it risks sabotaging the peace process entirely. So that's the latest as far as this conflict is concerned. The Iran war now seemingly, reflecting the differences that are now propping up between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. The question is whether the Israeli Prime Minister will listen to the American president. But amid all of this, many strategists are asking whether this is genuine friction that's happening between the two allies, longtime allies, America and Israel, that Netanyahu is refusing to listen to the U.S. president. Or is it just strategy that the United States is applying and Israel is playing along for the world to sort of understand that this is something that the two allies are working together upon? That, of course, we'll know when that deal happens, whether these strikes continue or not. But for the moment, this big question remains. Let me quickly go across to my correspondent, Susan Tehrani. She's joining us live on the broadcast from New York. Susan, this seems to be the biggest, confusion, question that many strategists are asking around the world, whether there's genuine friction, genuine differences between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, or is this just a strategy that the two allies are now using for the world to sort of calm down and see, look, we're progressing towards a deal, but right now we're just, striking Lebanon so that Iran remains, at a pedestal, at some sort of lower pedestal than the U.S. and Israel.
Yeah, so from the U.S. perspective, that's what has been reported out so far and has been confirmed by President Trump and J.D. Vance. Those are the only indications that we absolutely know to be true. And that is that the United States right now under this administration has an America First agenda. Now, the American First agenda, on the one hand, is, to use military deterrence like President Trump supports, or to be more isolationist like J.D. Vance, philosophically. But nonetheless, when it comes to the issue of Iran, the administration has been clear that they want a deal that deals with Iran's nuclear ambitions. Down the line, maybe it's Iran's proxies and its role in the Strait of Hormuz and whatnot. but Iran to not have a nuclear weapon. That's sort of one aspect of what Israel and Netanyahu want. They live in the same neighborhood as Iran, so they may want more of an expansion to rein in on Iran that the United States under this administration just doesn't have an appetite for. Now, whether or not there is genuine friction, at the end of the day, you know, President Trump continues to say that Israel is America's longstanding partner. Yes, there are reports and leaks that he said you may be having to fight this war alone if you continue attacking Lebanon. But there's really no policy indication that they're very far apart. I think the part that they are, as I mentioned, far apart is Netanyahu might want to continue this war. That's the last thing that Trump wants, and definitely J.D. Vance and the administration. If they use kinetic action, they were hoping that it would be in and out really quickly and not a prolonged war, with which Israel, if it has the U.S. backing, seems to want that.
You know, Susan, it's also interesting how the tone and the stance, which is much softer than how the U.S. started and the Trump administration started since this war began, has now toned down. It's very similar to what perhaps J.D. Vance was saying all along, that diplomacy should be one of the foremost tools that is being used between the two countries, between the two sides. And now the Trump administration seems to have reached that stance which J.D. Vance was saying all along. Does it have to do, a larger part of it, have to do with the fact that midterms are approaching and the war cannot be reignited? The Trump administration cannot afford more violence, more, spending on defense that already has happened?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think that the Trump administration is afraid to go back and hammer Iran because of the midterms. I think the Trump administration is very concerned, even though they don't say it, is how this war, rightly so, is associated with the economic problems that Americans are having. In terms of defense, at least the Defense Department is saying that, you know, they don't have a problem. They're ready and all options are on the table. The problem is this war is now associated with the terrible inflation that Americans are facing. High gas prices, and also just the cost of living basically has skyrocketed. So that is the concern that they have. Whether or not Trump is going to listen to anyone, even J.D. Vance, if he feels like he should go to Iran and attack again, you know, I highly unlikely that's the case. But I think his focus right now is on the economy and how can I hang on to the House and the Senate when Americans are frustrated with how much they're paying for just everyday essentials. So I think the focus is on the pocketbook, and then in turn, it sort of affects how he handles Iran and the diplomacy and whatnot.
All right, Susan, thanks very much for joining us with the latest at the moment. Let's wait and see how this moves forward between the three countries.